Discussion keeps the world turning.
This is Roundtable.
China just released a sweeping new plan that's about to shake up the world of theater, but probably not in the way that you'd expect. Think less about preserving dusty relics and more about ancient art meeting the algorithm. With vertical screen dramas, rising youth interest, and a major push behind the scenes, is this enough to make traditional performance the next big cultural wave? After that, let's talk about the smart economy. It's not about speeding up tasks anymore in this case. AI is now the engine of everything. Manufacturing power meets machine intelligence at a scale we've never seen. AI moves, in this case, from tool to pilot. And suddenly the question of who's actually running the show gets a lot more interesting. We're live from our studios in Beijing. This is Roundtable. I'm Steve. Thank you very much for sharing your time with us today. And for the show, I'm with Fei Fei and Yushan. First up, China has just released its brand new 3-year action plan for the revitalization of drama. And you can forget everything you think you know about preserving old theatrical classics. This is a full-blown backstage upgrade that's involving everything from cultivating new generations of performing talents to shooting folk opera micro-dramas on social media. We're seeing a surge in youth interest, which is really great to hear. Also, the birth of a new cultural landmark and landmarks. One example would be the newly established Shenzhen Peking Opera House. And there's also a national push to move theatrical arts to a new peak. We have veteran masters mentoring a new generation, and with that, the stage is set for a digital age renaissance. We talk a lot. Good afternoon, Fei Fei and Yushan. We talk a lot, and actually later in the show, we're going to talk about AI and industry and advancements, and we cover a lot of those different types of stories in China because they're in the news every day making headlines. But it's great to see that the arts is not being left behind.
Exactly. I was so thrilled. I was so happy when I first heard that this is happening because
you used to work in theater.
Yeah, I used to work as intern in this field for about 2 years. And when you think about performances and a performing art type, you see it as a grandeur kind of production, but behind it is like layers and layers of hundreds of thousands of different pieces being put together by a whole team of people, and each and every stage of that, from the cultivating of the young artists to how it should be presented, how to save the cost, how to make everything sustainable and make the production performable and have a good reputation that the theaters are willing to invite it in over and over again in the future. These are all things that are being considered and is continue on being elevated as we talk about the new action plan. And this is what the industry insiders are calling it as a reassuring pill, because it provides a clear roadmap to move the arts from just being okay, not bad, to really, truly becoming world classics. And the plan basically spells out 24 specific moves to enhance the industry's ecosystem. And I roughly concluded them as the follow few aspects that I personally found very fascinating. One of the biggest shifts has to land on the cracking down on those massive, wasteful, mega productions that cost a fortune, but kind of lack soul and lack sustainability in future arrangements.
What do you mean a mega production that lacks soul?
I'm going to give you one example. Okay, so this is the Italian opera Aida. If you're an if you are an opera fan, you'll know
Verdi,
that this
right?
is yeah, it's by Verdi, and it was created back in the 19th century. It's an old-time classic. But around a decade ago, one Chinese theater imported what was billed as the most magnificent version of Aida ever staged, and they hired the set and the scenery from outside of China, and in order to better preserve it and protect it, it came in from railway, and that alone costed I think 2 million yuan for just the freight cost.
Just to ship the set.
Yeah, just to ship the set.
That would be like tons of train car. It came by train.
Exactly. It came by train, and they even tried to recreate the whole scene because the story happens in ancient Egypt. That's the background. So the stage even featured life-sized replicas of Egyptian sphinx and temples, and creating just how as if the audiences are traveling to Egypt on the site. But the problem with that is the scenery and everything was borrowed. You have to return it after you finish the season of performing it. And you can't always expect itself to spend 2 million yuan each and every time and borrow it in and then borrow it back. And those theaters, they're lending these equipments to other theaters worldwide too. So it really ended up to be just a facade of grandeur production for one season. Several shows in a row, and that's it. No other productions after 2017. So for the past decade, it only existed in memories.
Oh, I see. So a ton of money was invested into the show to bring the actual set here. It stayed for a few days, and then it got shipped back. And I'm assuming that the theater company lost money on that.
Yeah, because box office never really
can't make that up.
Make it up.
Only a few nights of ticket sales.
So here is the issue, and that's what the new regulation, the new action plan is trying to avoid in future productions.
That's very. For me, I think this is one part. For me, I think another feature kind of stand out in this action plan is about supporting local art troupes, because in China we have so many local art troupes, different art forms and folk operas, and they are sort of in this endangered phase, simply because, first of all, for a lot of these folk operas, the only very local cultural oriented. For example, my husband is from the city called Quanzhou, and
where's that in the country?
In Fujian province,
okay.
in a region called Hokkien, and they have this Hokkien dialect. And that folk opera is sung in this Hokkien dialect. So for me, who is not in their local culture growing up, I cannot understand what the opera is singing about.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so it's very difficult for me to understand and also getting interested in that opera in particular. So it's mostly targeted just in that area. And that is the problem when it comes to these kind of art forms. If you don't have the local support, that means it's very difficult for you to sustain in the long term.
We can't use a blanket term, Chinese folk opera.
No.
Because there's just too many different types. There's too many different regions in the country that have their own distinct style.
And they are also at the very end of extinction too. Out of China's 348 folk opera genres, nearly 300 are considered rare and over 200 are ecologically fragile, meaning that the performers are all elders above 60 years old, and that there's not enough young people, young blood joining the performance to pass it on. And among all these, 121 genres are preserved by only a single state-run troupe each. So one troupe for this one type of opera, that's it. Nobody else from outside of this region ever heard of it or will ever get to know it. And while 106 genres do not even have a single state-run troupe at all. So that's reported by Xinhua News earlier this year. That's how pressing it has become for us to really act on the protection and if not to rescue of these local operas.
Under the new action plan, a new system is being considered to critique and hold creators accountable for poor quality, inefficient work that wastes resources. I guess an example would be the Aida production that you talked about before. That would be considered. I mean, it sounds like such a terrible thing to say. It's a waste of resources to bring a beautiful production from somewhere else and let people experience it. But when you're losing money like that, then it can be described such as that. So now what they're going to do is what they're calling script first. So the goal is to focus on genuine artistic depth And that will give creators the freedom to present genuinely good works for the audience. So there's a little bit of quality control involved here.
And a huge encouragement on young scriptwriters and performers to really get bold. By bold, I mean confident enough to showcase what you think the young audiences or the new generation audiences really want to see presented on the stage, and how you can really vividly demonstrate it on the stage in a way that's suitable in the modern time, so that a particular type of art can keep on being passed on as an inheritance instead of being extinguished as time goes by. That's something that we're really trying to aim at through the different regulations throughout the years, and especially showcased in the new regulation in the new action plan too.
There's something called the 1 yuan gold seed plan. This is not new in 2026. Actually, it came out as early as I think early 2025.
Yes, that's a joint campaign launched to encourage those really well-known, famous enough kind of script writers to submit their famous scripts with 1 yuan as a fee, as almost like a charity kind of donation.
So what does that mean? Local troops pay 1 yuan to put on the production?
Yes. So that
or for the rights to the script, I guess.
Yeah, for the rights of using the script and adapting from the script to put on their local kind of themes and productions, so that more people, the grassroots, the people who've never seen it before, can get a peek at what this is about. And one very interesting example is a very famous playwright Chen Ming's 10th rank village official, 10品村官. It's among the first batch of the 20 play that got included in this campaign. And this show, it was set in a small village in northern Jiangsu province in eastern China back in the late 1990s. And the story follows a young farmer who travels to the city and come back to the village and unexpectedly brought a group of foxes with him. And then the whole village in northern Jiangsu province started to raise fox back in the late 1990s and grew from ground zero to a like a little ecosystem industry in there.
So that's one example of the 20 to 30 works that can be rented out, I suppose we can put it like that.
Yeah, rented out, and it covers a whole lot of different genres, like the historical subjects, folk legends, or like realistic themes like this one. I especially asked Yushan if this is known to him, since he's from Jiangsu province, and he says it's possible, but I've never heard of it. So you see, even people from the same province, they do not necessarily have ever seen or heard stories like this before.
Interesting. What about when we're talking about cultivating talent, the next generation of opera performers? Where do they come from? How are they finding them? How are they collaborating together to make sure that there is talent coming through the pipeline?
Well, the plan aims, first of all, to expand the ranks of these theater performers, professionals with a steady emergence of leading young talent. And they're setting up mentorships where veteran masters can pass on their classic plays and their tricks and their traditions to younger performers to make sure these skills don't just disappear, because as we've talked about, a lot of these local operas, in particular smaller troupes, they do have difficulties of finding young talents. One thing is that first of all, the resources are really limited. It's only one troupe in one small city, for example, or even a small county. They can only reach out to so many people in their range. And so when it comes to where to find people, young people in particular, that could be interested in this particular form of arts, that's one of the bottlenecks. And the other side, and another thing is how to make sure that these young talents, after they getting involved in this art form, how can they stay, long term in this job in particular? I heard a story. It's actually coming from the city of Taizhou in Zhejiang province, also in eastern part of China, and they have their local art form called luantan, which is very kind of sounds familiar, similar to Peking opera,
Okay.
but the language is different. First of all, it's in their local dialect, and the performance can also have some differences when it comes to the movements and so on and so forth. And at one time, they have to borrow some talents from a neighboring city so that they can train to test if they're able, they can perform on stage. And then what they find is more difficult is that after a few years of performing in Taizhou, a lot of the younger talents from that neighboring cities return to their home city. Simply because, first of all, they're not from here, and the pay is not really high, and it's very difficult just settle in Taizhou. So they start to finding the problems. For example, what if I get you a housing? I'll solve the accommodation for you. What if I can find for your children? I can find your schools, find a school for your children, so you can feel inclusive. You can feel that you can settle down in the city of Taizhou.
Feel secure.
Yeah, feel
Have
secure.
security.
Yeah, and that's one of their solutions to this problem. But and I think when it comes to the nationwide level, not as many cities in China is resourceful and as rich as the city of Taizhou, for instance. It has a lot of private companies which they can come in and support such efforts. But for other cities, that could be remaining a question mark.
Yeah, because it would be, in that case, it would be troop by troop.
Yeah.
And what you can afford and what you can't afford.
Yeah.
The situation that you described in that particular city, Taizhou.
Taizhou, yes.
Sure, they have, okay, we can help you set up here. We can help you find accommodations and make a secure life, help you find a secure life here. But that wouldn't be every single troop, right? This would be a case-by-case scenario.
And that's the local situation for one particular genre. But in terms of overall drama education and cultivating talents, we actually have formal systems, educational systems for that. Take the National Academy of Chinese Theatre Arts as an example. It compresses departments such as speaking opera or the performance and directing and music design and stage art for these traditional different types of folk operas. And that's covering the scope from youth training since age 12 all the way to master degrees and also bachelor degrees. So that's a very general kind of coverage since a young age.
So that's a separate type of schooling then.
So
you don't, if you chose that theatrical path, you wouldn't go to a public middle school or high school. You'd go to a theater middle school, a theater high school.
That's usually the case because...
Ooh, interesting. I didn't know that. So that means that you have to choose...
From a very young age.
Right, whether you're going to be a pro or not.
Yeah, for that particular school I mentioned, now the academy currently has, well, this is said on their website, 2,895 enrolled students, including 392 master degree students, 1,685 undergraduate students, and 818 secondary school students, meaning that these are kids. These over 800 kids are being trained as professional artists since middle school age.
Because of a lot of these skills required for performances in this tradition, especially for like Peking opera or a lot of folk operas.
Vocal training.
Yeah,
would be,
you need to start early
at
a
a
young
age.
age.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it would be almost impossible on some level to
Exactly.
get that level of mastery. And I think that's also one of the reasons in the action plan, they also stressed to make sure different forms of these arts entering school in an early stage to make sure more young kids getting familiar with them, first of all, and then you can see if you're interested in the future, if you want to develop a professional career in this particular art form.
Another change that's happening is the traditional forms of art are now going digital. And the new plan is pushing theater straight onto our phones. This is a unique twist.
Yeah, it is. We're talking about AI-enhanced shows and even vertical screen micro dramas on social media.
Because the micro dramas have existed.
It's everywhere.
Yeah, well, they've existed with just like the non-operatic forms.
Exactly.
But now this is kind of fun and unique.
I watched one this morning that features a very traditional type of folk opera in northwestern China's Shanxi province. It's called Qinqiang. It's known to be kind of wild and roaring and hard to understand for people outside of that region. But apparently there is a new ultra short drama named Flame Steed, Unquenchable Flame, and that's originating from the old-time classic Qinqiang opera, The Flame Steed, and it's being adapted into a 36 episodes of ultra short drama, featuring both the normal traditional ultra short drama style and singing. So how they do it is that they have these performers sing out those very iconic pieces from this old-time classic Qinqiang opera, and amid that, just weave in the story of the traditional opera in the form of just normal TV drama style or the ultra-short drama style.
So they've kept it as you would see it on stage.
Yeah.
They just chopped it into mini pieces, or did they kind of modernize it for Gen Z?
Modernize how?
The reason I ask is because I remember, I think it was the 1990s, when the director, I think it was Baz Luhrmann, who remade a Shakespearean play, Romeo and Juliet, with Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah, I saw that movie.
Right? Now, I was in university at that time, and I was studying poetry and literature, and I remember we had a very spirited discussion in the class about whether that had a place in modern society, because that film adaptation had like gold guns.
They have this modern twist.
It was very, very, very modern, right? And so the argument for was, we're taking a lost artist, almost, Shakespeare, who doesn't really exist in modern society anymore, and making him accessible for people who probably would never read Shakespeare in their life. The argument against was, and the purists, right, they argue against this, saying you can't touch that. It's like you can't go on stage and sing a Michael Jackson. You can't impersonate Michael Jackson. You just don't go there, right? He's a legend. You just leave it.
It's a classic. Just keep it original.
Just keep it the way it is and don't touch it. So the reason I asked you
I see
what they're doing with these ultra short vertical micro dramas of classic operas.
this is an adaptation for sure. By the look of it, you wouldn't recognize immediately that this is intangible cultural heritage of China.
Right, so the purists must be hating this so much.
Well, then as the show goes on, you start to hear these actors singing. Actually, they're not the actors singing. It's dubbed by the professional artists. And if you look at the professional artist, it's like it has all the props and set that look completely different from how it's staged on the ultra short drama, but still, people watch it. Over 800, amasses 8.44 million on-platform interactions. And young people are commenting that I arrive at the final episode all the way from the first one. And the Emperor's voice here truly shocked me. I wasn't expecting him to sing. And then below that comment, somebody commented his or her comment saying that, actually it's dubbed. And everyone can sing, apparently. The Emperor's voice is astonishing. It's just that I can't understand it. You see, that's how they kind of put on subtitles and everything and push a traditional art form noticeable to younger generation through ultra short drama.
So the numbers, I mean, the purists can say what they want, right? But if the numbers are there, 8.44 million views, and the comments are positive, then obviously there's a place for this form of artistry too. Getting it out there to an audience that may not otherwise have the opportunity to see it. Now, speaking of that, giving it to an audience who might not get the opportunity to see it, one of the initiatives is about taking the show on the road, so to speak, and going global.
Yeah, that's so cool as well. I mean, one recent example would be the 2025 Edinburgh Fringe Festival.
It's in Scotland, right?
Yeah, it's been around for a long time. And
1947 that was founded.
Yeah, exactly. And last year, over 10 Chinese productions were invited to perform for the global audiences. And among them, wide categories were covered, such as Echoes, 广陵绝响, it's a stage drama, and 庄子's Dream, 庄周梦蝶, also a stage drama. You can see these are all originating from Chinese literary classics, while there are also modern ones such as The Life of Mine, which is a Beijing Chu opera production 曲剧, featuring dialogues and singing in Beijing dialects and local tunes. You see, I'm a Beijinger and I've never heard of 曲剧. I've never seen one single performance of that too. And audiences in Edinburgh apparently watched it before I do.
Well, but that also makes sense. Like in Beijing, there are also a lot of like French, Italian opera singers performing on the stage in French and Italian. You just put on subtitles in Chinese.
Yeah.
What do you think about that, Fei Fei? I mean, a lot of the people at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, which is huge, by the way, it's really popular and well known. A lot of people who would watch that show or the Beijing show wouldn't know who Zhuangzi is.
Definitely.
They would have no idea. So do you think that taking these Chinese pieces of gold, so to speak, and showing them to an audience that doesn't necessarily know anything about it, do you think that that's worthwhile? Or do you think, well, if they don't even know who that is and they don't know anything about the history of it, is there a point to this?
Well, I definitely think it's worthwhile. First of all, even though, for example, a person from Scotland never heard of Zhuangzi and probably would never had the interest of getting to know Zhuangzi in his lifetime. But what the philosophy behind Zhuangzi is something I think most people would find interested in, because it asks a lot of common questions in your life, like what is right and wrong? How do you balance your pride versus something else? So we have a similar debate on another podcast that we aired during this Chinese New Year. But I think it's asked a lot of common philosophical questions, and that is the tricky part when it comes to when we're trying to publicize a lot of this Chinese dramas, also local dramas on a world stage, is that just taking the part that can resonate with the international audience, and you just make sure you adapt the storyline, you adapt the cultural elements so that it's accessible for a non-Chinese speaker.
Yeah, so, I agree. I mean, I saw 2 performances in Xi'an. One was I don't know what the official term would be, but the mask performance where...
我戏 or dance of, like they dance with masks on.
No, and then the mask changes and I don't know how it changes.
Oh, face changing
mask thing. Yeah. What's the official term for that?
变脸.
Thank you. So, and apparently the secret is nobody knows how they do it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right? Because that was my first question. Like, how? Hey, whoa. How do you do that? Everybody said nobody knows. It's a cool, beautiful thing to watch. And the other thing that I saw was, and I apologize because I don't know the name of this either, but they have like a white thin screen, and behind that white thin screen, they do a puppet show.
皮影戏.
That was so cool to see as well.
Yeah.
Now, did I know what was going on? No. But I didn't care that I didn't know what was going on because I really enjoyed that cultural experience. And I agree with you about having these types of things overseas. It's just another door, an artistic door that's opened to Chinese culture for people who don't know anything about it. But for here, why do we need, we talk about these new plans and these quality control and troops and mentoring young people. Why now? Why do we need these types of things?
Because we need a step further. Like you said, art and performances, it's a type of people-to-people exchanging for people to get to know China and China get to know the world by importing the good ones. And in recent years, we do see that the overall development environment for the theater industry has gradually improved here in China. Actually, this is according to the British Council that 2024 marked a record-breaking year for box office sales in China's performing arts. And the market size reached £8.16 billion in that year, up almost 40% since 2019, and that 70% of the ticket holders are young people aged 18 to 34. So that's all good news. And after decades of infrastructure building and global engagement, we see that now the focus has gradually shifted to audience development and domestic content creation. How can we really make good shows for the modern day young people? So we see there are still challenges in that domain, and one of them would be the short shortage of high-quality masterpieces, especially among traditional art forms such as Peking opera. Because back in the days, in many years ago in the past, troops had their own creative departments with stable in-house writing teams, and each school, we know the Mei Pai, the Cheng Pai, and there are 4 leading schools in terms of Peking opera. Each of them feature a very unique style of singing and performing. They all have their own troops and a very systematic training system. But nowadays, in recent years, however, a lack of creative vitality has kind of led to a very curious situation where the theaters have old operas and they are performed in old ways over and over again. Like, people think about one type of performance, like 贵妃醉酒. A lot of Chinese, if not everybody, knows this piece as a very iconic Peking opera piece, but everybody knows that it's that story. They know what to expect from it, and they know who are the best in this industry of performance when it comes to this particular show. So how can we change that stereotype? Is one thing that really got us thinking, and what this new action plan is forcing on.
So, and here is where I think I can be a little bit critical about, is also about the storyline. A lot of the stories coming from, because all of the operas is based on some sort of story, and a lot of storylines has been told for the past 500 years.
So everybody knows it.
Everybody knows, and nothing really new. Nothing can relate to current life, to modern
How
China.
many times can I hear the story Journey to the West before I get bored of it?
Yeah.
For example.
Yeah, and then thinking about modern Chinese literature on stage, there are also only a handful, especially in contemporary cases, there are only a handful of them that can be said as masterpiece, that can be worth passing down for generations. And so I think that's the reason in this action plan, they also emphasize a lot on the role of script writers, is that you need to come up with stories that can relate to the modern society life, and also, your own culture as well. Telling
stories of modern life through classic methods.
Yeah.
A Peking-style opera of working 9 to 6 and dating online, or something like that.
Exactly. That's what they're heading to. I remember a few years ago, there's a Peking opera new style of production. It's Peking opera form, but it's adopting a script from a Western stage drama. Imagine that, a Western story, modern day story being adapted into Peking opera. We found it so alien, so strange when Chinese people first heard that. But again, it was a start. And according to the experts who mentioned this as an example in this year's 2-session speech, he himself is also a CPPCC member, said that that's where we're aiming at. That's how Peking opera as a 国粹, as a national treasure kind of pride that China takes, can really get resonated with people outside of this country. How you find the communal value in the stories we're telling.
And also, artists are supposed to be bold. You are supposed to be testing boundaries, asking questions, just poking uncomfortable questions into people's face. And that's the gem of arts, I would say. And I think that's also why a lot of experts, and so to speak, are calling for boldness in their production, is that don't be afraid of certain things. Don't just feel comfortable in your comfort zone. That's the reason.
Don't be boring.
Yeah, that's also the reason a lot of artists lose their attractions to the public.
Because nobody wants to go anymore to the theater because it has become stale, so to speak. Yeah, I really enjoyed this conversation on theater and the arts here in China. We talk a lot about industry and AI on the show, so it was nice to take a little break from that.